My name is Graham Ellsworth, and I'm 34 years old. I work as a university researcher here in Chicago specializing in behavioral psychology. My salary of $85,000 a year isn't spectacular, but it's enough to maintain a decent one-bedroom apartment near Northwestern and live comfortably. For the past 5 years, I'd been in what I thought was a solid relationship with Lydia Harcourt, a 30-year-old marketing coordinator earning around $60,000 at a mid-sized firm downtown. We'd been engaged for almost 3 years with our wedding scheduled for September 2024. Everything seemed perfectly planned out. Our relationship had its routine. We'd spend weekends apartment hunting for a place we could share after the marriage. Lydia still lived with 2 roommates in Lincoln Park, splitting a $2,400 rent 3 ways. My place near campus ran me $1,900 a month, but the location was perfect for my work. The plan was simple. She'd move in with me after the wedding, and we'd start looking for something bigger within a year or 2. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. In early June 2024, Lydia had planned a 3-week trip to Europe with her college friends Sarah, Jessica, and Amanda, the same group she traveled with twice before during our relationship. I was fine with it. Actually, I encouraged it. After years of wedding planning stress, I figured she deserved some time to unwind with her friends before we tied the knot. The night before her departure, everything seemed normal. We had dinner at our favorite Italian place on Rush Street. Lydia seemed excited about the trip, showing me the itinerary on her phone. Paris, Barcelona, Rome, Amsterdam, a proper European tour. She talked about the museums she wanted to visit, the restaurants Sarah had researched. Nothing felt off. What I didn't know was that she'd already started distancing herself digitally. Later, I'd realized she'd been preparing for this moment, quietly adjusting privacy settings, preparing her exit strategy while smiling and discussing travel plans with me. The next morning, I drove her to O'Hare. The terminal was packed with summer travelers. We found her friends at the check-in counter, all 4 of them buzzing with excitement about their adventure. Lydia and I stood in line together, her hand in mine, discussing the usual travel stuff, making sure she had her passport, international phone plan activated, all that routine couple conversation. Then, as we approached the security checkpoint, she stopped walking, just stopped right there in the middle of the terminal traffic. People were flowing around us, dragging their luggage, rushing to catch flights. But Lydia just stood there looking at the floor. "Graham," she said, not meeting my eyes, "I think we need to take a break." I honestly thought I'd misheard her. The airport was loud. Announcements echoing off the high ceilings, conversations in a dozen languages mixing together. "What did you say?" I asked. She looked up. Then, and I could see she'd been rehearsing this moment. This wasn't spontaneous. "We need some time apart. I need to figure things out." Her friends were already through the security line, waving at her to hurry up. Sarah was pointing at her watch, mouthing something about their boarding time. "Figure what out exactly?" I kept my voice steady, even though my mind was racing. "Lydia, we're getting married in 3 months. What needs figuring out?" She shrugged, actually shrugged like we were discussing dinner plans instead of our entire future. "I just need space to think about us, about everything." "So, you decided to tell me this now at the airport, right before you leave for 3 weeks? I didn't plan it this way," she said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "It just feels right. The timing, I mean. We'll talk when I get back." Sarah was now walking back toward security, clearly irritated. "Lydia, we're going to miss our flight." Lydia grabbed her carry-on. "I have to go. We'll figure this out when I return, okay? Don't overthink it." And just like that, she was gone through security down the terminal onto a plane to Paris, leaving me standing in the middle of O'Hare International Airport, wondering what the hell had just happened? That afternoon, I tried calling her straight to voicemail. I sent a text asking if we could at least talk about what she meant by taking a break. No response. I tried. WhatsApp. Message delivered, but never read. By evening, I realized she'd blocked my number entirely. Then I checked social media, blocked there too. Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn, where we'd been connected professionally. Complete digital eraser. Within 24 hours, Lydia Harcourt had effectively deleted me from her online existence while she toured Europe with her college friends. And I was left to figure out what to do with a wedding plan for September. Deposits already paid, invitations already ordered. The first week was the hardest. Not because I was heartbroken, but because I was trying to understand the logic behind Lydia's actions. In my line of work, human behavior usually follows patterns. People don't just flip a switch and become completely different overnight. But the systematic blocking suggested this wasn't as spontaneous as she'd made it seem. By day 3, I'd made my first decision. I called our wedding venue, the Chicago History Museum, and explained the situation. The events coordinator, Mrs. Patterson, was surprisingly understanding. Unfortunately, Mr. Ellsworth, this happens more often than you'd think, she said. We can hold your deposit for 90 days in case you work things out. After that, we'll need to release the date. I thanked her, but knew I wouldn't need 90 days. Please go ahead and cancel everything. I'll forfeit the deposit. Are you certain that's $3,000? I'm certain. Next was the catering company. Another $4,500 gone. Then the photographer at $1,800. The florist at $1,200. The band we'd booked for $4,000. The wedding dress alterations Lydia had already paid for but were non-refundable. $800 down the drain. One by one, I methodically dismantled our wedding. Each phone call cost me money. Deposits, cancellation fees, non-refundable payments. By the end of the first week, I was out nearly $15,000 in non-refundable costs alone. The total wedding budget had been $38,000, but thankfully, most vendors only required partial deposits up front. But something interesting happened with each cancellation. I felt lighter. The hardest conversation was with my parents. In Springfield, my mother cried. My father, ever practical, asked if I was sure I wasn't being too hasty. Dad, she systematically blocked me on everything. Before getting on that plane, that's not someone who wants to work things out. Maybe she just needs space, son. Women can be complicated about weddings. It's not about the wedding, I said. It's about respect. Adults don't handle relationship problems by disappearing and cutting off all communication. By week 2, I'd started hearing things through mutual friends. Jake Morrison, who worked with Lydia's roommate, Amanda, mentioned that the girls had been posting photos from Barcelona. In one of the pictures, according to Jake, Lydia was living her best life, his words, at some rooftop bar, surrounded by guys they'd met at their hostel. I didn't ask for details, but they kept coming. Tyler, who was dating Sarah, showed me screenshots from Instagram stories. Lydia dancing at clubs in Rome. Beach photos from the French Riviera, where she was clearly very close to some Italian guy named Marco. Not a care in the world. Meanwhile, I was calling vendors and explaining why our September wedding was off. Week 3 brought an interesting development. My friend David, who taught sociology at Northwestern, forwarded me something that made my blood run cold. His girlfriend Emma was connected to Jessica on social media and had seen posts in a private group chat that Jessica had accidentally screenshotted and shared publicly for a few minutes before deleting. The messages were from Lydia, sent from Amsterdam. She was painting herself as the victim of an overbearing fiancé who was pressuring her into marriage. According to her version, I was controlling and had been pushing the wedding timeline against her wishes. She claimed she'd only asked for space to think, but I'd overreacted and impulsively canceled everything without even talking to her. The most infuriating part, she told her friends that she was planning to graciously forgive my rash decisions when she returned, and that we'd probably end up having a more intimate wedding instead. I read those screenshots 3 times. Then I set my phone down and laughed. Actually laughed out loud in my empty apartment. The audacity was almost impressive. That's when I made my second major decision. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of her social media activity before she blocked me. Receipts from all the wedding cancellations. A detailed timeline of events starting with her exact words at the airport. Phone records showing my blocked calls. I created a folder on my computer labeled facts and methodically organized everything. I also made a third decision that week. Lydia's belongings needed to go. She'd been gradually moving things into my place. Over the past year, clothes, books, toiletries, kitchen items. Half my closet contained her dresses. My medicine cabinet was full of her expensive skincare products. The refrigerator held her almond milk and organic yogurt that she insisted on buying at Whole Foods. I spent an entire Saturday boxing everything up, every piece of clothing, every book, every face cream and hair product. I was meticulous about it, making sure nothing was damaged. When I finished, I had 14 cardboard boxes stacked in my living room. I texted Amanda, her roommate, whose number I still had, and told her she could pick up Lydia's things anytime. Amanda responded within an hour. Graham, don't you think you're being a bit dramatic? She just wanted some space to think, I wrote back. Adults who want space to think don't systematically block their partners on everything and disappear for 3 weeks. The boxes will be in my building's lobby. Coordinate with Miguel, the doorman. Week 4 was when I started sleeping well again. Week 5, I booked my own trip, a research conference in Seattle that I'd been considering. Week 6, I signed up for a cooking class I'd always wanted to try. By the time Lydia was scheduled to return, I'd essentially rebuilt my routine around being single. I'd had the building management remove her from the approved visitor list and deactivate her key card access. I'd removed her name from my emergency contacts at work. I'd even rearranged my furniture, putting my desk back where I'd originally had it before accommodating her vanity mirror. 3 days before her scheduled return, my phone buzzed with a WhatsApp message from an international number. It was her using someone else's phone or a European SIM card. Graham, I've been trying to reach you. We need to talk when I get back. I'm ready to work things out. I stared at that message for a long time. 6 weeks of silence, and now she was ready to work things out. As if I'd been sitting around waiting for her royal permission to resume our relationship. I typed back, there's nothing to work out. I've moved on. Her response came immediately. What do you mean you've moved on? I just needed time to think. You had 6 weeks to think. I used that time to think, too. The wedding is canceled. Your things are with your roommate. We're done. Graham, you're being ridiculous. We can reschedule the wedding. I realize now that I was just having pre-wedding jitters. It's completely normal. Normal. She thought disappearing for 6 weeks was normal pre-wedding behavior. I turned off my phone and went to bed. Tomorrow, Lydia would be back in Chicago expecting to resume our life together. But there wasn't going to be any resumption. There was going to be a very different conversation than the one she was planning for. Lydia returned to Chicago on a Tuesday afternoon in late July 2024. I know this because my building's doorman, Miguel, called me at work to let me know a woman was asking about me in the lobby. She didn't have access anymore, so she couldn't get upstairs. She says, "She's your fiance, Mr. Ellsworth. Should I let her up? I have her listed as removed from approved visitors." No, Miguel, we're not engaged anymore. If she needs something, she can call me. Should I ask her to leave or just tell her she needs to contact me directly? Don't let her wait in the lobby. 20 minutes later, my phone rang from her actual number. She'd unblocked me, apparently. Graham, what the hell? Miguel wouldn't let me upstairs and then asked me to leave. This is ridiculous. Her voice sounded different, more entitled, more demanding than I remembered. Maybe the trip had changed her. Or maybe I was just hearing her. Clearly for the first time. I told you we were done, Lydia. I meant it. Over. WhatsApp. You're ending a 5-year relationship over WhatsApp while I'm in another country. The irony was staggering. You ended our relationship at O'Hare Airport, then blocked me for 6 weeks. I just made it official. I never said I wanted to end anything. I said we needed a break. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I was standing, watching you disappear for 6 weeks without a word, it looked pretty finished to me. She started crying then. Not soft tears, but that dramatic sobbing she used to do when she didn't get her way about restaurant choices or weekend plans. It had worked on me before, but now it just sounded manipulative. Graham, please. Can we at least meet somewhere and talk about this? I realize I handled things poorly, but I was just overwhelmed. The wedding planning, moving in together, all of it felt like too much at once. I needed space to breathe. You needed space for 6 weeks in Europe while I dealt with canceling our wedding. Got it. You canceled our wedding. Her voice shot up an octave. Graham, I never told you to cancel the wedding. You didn't tell me anything, Lydia. That was the problem. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, going in circles. She insisted she'd only wanted a few weeks to clear her head. I reminded her that she'd blocked me completely, making any communication impossible. She claimed it was because she needed to focus on herself. I pointed out that she'd seemed pretty focused on posting party pictures with random guys in European nightclubs. That's when her tone changed completely. Who told you about the pictures? Have people been spying on me? When you post photos on social media, Lydia, they're not exactly private. Your friends have friends who have friends. Chicago's not that big a city. So, you've been stalking my social media through other people. That's creepy, Graham. And there it was. The deflection, the attempt to make me the villain in her story. I'd been expecting it, but hearing it still amazed me. I'm done with this conversation, I said. And I'm done with us. Don't call me again. But of course, she called again. Over the next 3 days, my phone rang constantly. Different numbers each time. Her roommates' phones, her coworkers' phones, even her 28-year-old sister Rachel calling from Milwaukee where she worked as a nurse. Rachel was persistent. Graham, I don't understand. What's happening? Lydia says you just disappeared and canceled everything while she was traveling. She's devastated. Did she mention that she told me we needed a break and then blocked me on everything before leaving the country? Silence on the other end. Rachel, did she tell you that part of the story? She said you two had mutually agreed to take some time apart during her trip. Mutually agreed, Rachel. She announced it at the airport and then made it impossible for me to contact her for 6 weeks. That's not mutual agreement. That's abandonment. More silence. Look, Rachel continued. She admits she handled it badly, but she wants to work things out. Can't you at least meet with her? No, I can't and I won't. By Thursday, the calls had escalated to visits. Lydia showed up at my office crying in the psychology department lobby until campus security asked her to leave. She appeared at my gym, my grocery store, even my parents' house in Springfield. A 2-hour drive she made specifically to explain her side to my mother. That's when I decided enough was enough. I created a group text with 10 key people. Both sets of parents, Lydia's sister Rachel, her roommates Sarah and Amanda, and a few mutual friends, including David and his girlfriend Emma, plus Tyler and Jake. I kept the message factual and brief. Hi, everyone. Since there seems to be some confusion about recent events, I want to clarify what actually happened. On June 15th at O'Hare Airport, Lydia told me we needed a break. She then blocked me on all social media and phone contacts for 6 weeks while traveling in Europe. During that time, I canceled our wedding and related services. 3 days ago, she returned and wants to work things out. I've moved on, and won't be resuming the relationship. I'm sharing this timeline because people have been contacting me based on incomplete information. Thanks for understanding. The response was immediate and explosive. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with messages from everyone on that list. My mother called, confused because Lydia had told her I'd abandoned her during a difficult time. Sarah texted asking if I was seriously airing private business in a group chat. Rachel sent 3 paragraphs defending her sister's need for space. But the most telling response came 20 minutes later from Jessica as a private message to me. Graham, I need you to know that. Lydia spent most of the trip talking about how she was finally free and could figure out what she really wanted. She hooked up with guys in 3 different cities and kept saying the break was the best thing that ever happened to her. She only started panicking about the relationship when Sarah showed her your group message about canceling everything. I thought you should know the truth before I say anything in the group chat. I replied, Jessica, if you're comfortable sharing that information with the group, I think everyone should know what really happened during her soul-searching trip. 5 minutes later, Jessica posted in the group chat, I was on the trip with Lydia. Graham deserves to know that she spent 3 weeks talking about being finally free and hooked up with multiple guys. She only wanted him back when she realized he'd actually moved on. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. The silence that followed was deafening. No more calls from relatives. No more visits to my office. No more tearful voicemails about working things out. Lydia tried one last desperate move. She still had a physical key to my apartment, the one I'd forgotten about when I had her electronic access removed. She let herself in on Saturday morning while I was at the gym and was sitting on my couch when I returned, holding a handwritten letter. Miguel later told me what happened. Mr. Ellsworth, I'm sorry. She showed me the key and said you were expecting her, but when she didn't come back down after an hour, I got worried and was about to call you. I should have called first, even with the key. That's on me. It's okay, Miguel. She's manipulative. But from now on, even if someone has a key, if they're not on the approved list, please call me first. I wrote you this letter explaining everything. She said, as if breaking and entering was perfectly reasonable, about why I needed space, about how much you mean to me, about how we can start fresh. I looked at her sitting on my couch in my apartment that she no longer had any right to be in, holding a letter that was 6 weeks too late. Lydia, you need to leave now and give me that key. Did you see Jessica's message in the group? She was drunk half the trip. She doesn't remember things clearly. I don't care what Jessica remembers. I care that you thought it was acceptable to disappear from a relationship without explanation and then break into my apartment, expecting everything to be the same. She stood up, finally understanding that her letter wasn't going to change anything. You're really going to throw away 5 years over one mistake? I'm not throwing away anything. You already did that at O'Hare Airport. She handed me the key and walked toward the door, then turned back one final time. You know what, Graham? Maybe this is for the best. Maybe I dodged a bullet. Any man who would humiliate his fiancée in a group text instead of working through problems like an adult isn't someone I want to marry anyway. And there it was, the final deflection. The last attempt to rewrite history and make herself the victim. I watched her leave and realized something profound. I hadn't dodged a bullet. I dodged a nuclear bomb. The weeks that followed were remarkably peaceful. After months of wedding stress and relationship drama, the silence felt like a vacation. No more vendor meetings. No more debates about centerpieces or seating charts. No more walking on eggshells around Lydia's mood swings that I'd somehow learned to normalize over 5 years. I threw myself into work with renewed energy. That research project on behavioral patterns in crisis situations that I'd been putting off suddenly fascinating. I submitted a paper to the Journal of Applied Psychology that had been sitting on my desk for months. I started collaborating with colleagues at other universities, something I'd always intended to do but never found time for. when my evenings were consumed with wedding planning. The Seattle conference in late August was a turning point. Not only did I present my research to positive reviews, but I reconnected with Dr. Patricia Williams from Stanford, whom I'd known during graduate school. Over dinner at a waterfront restaurant in Pike Place Market, she mentioned that Stanford was looking for someone with my expertise for a joint research position with their behavioral economics department. It's a 2-year fellowship, she explained, but it could easily turn into something permanent. The salary would be around $120,000 plus research funding. You'd have access to resources here that most researchers only dream about. Plus, let's be honest, sometimes a change of scenery is exactly what we need. 6 months earlier, I would have dismissed the idea immediately. Lydia's marketing job was in Chicago. Our families were in the Midwest. We had a life built there. But sitting in that Seattle restaurant watching the sunset over Puget Sound, I realized I didn't have any of those constraints anymore. Send me the details, I told Patricia. I'm interested. Meanwhile, back in Chicago, Lydia was apparently struggling with the fallout from our very public breakup. My friend David mentioned that his girlfriend Emma had heard through the social media grapevine that several of Lydia's friends had distanced themselves after Jessica's revelation. Apparently, learning that she'd spent her soul-arching trip hooking up with strangers while her fiancé was canceling their wedding hadn't sat well with some people. Her work situation became complicated, too. Jake Morrison, who worked at her marketing firm, told me that Lydia had been asking colleagues for relationship advice, painting herself as the victim of an emotionally unavailable ex-fiancé. But when some of her coworkers saw the group text screenshots that had been shared around our social circle, the narrative fell apart pretty quickly. She tried to tell our boss that you were harassing her after the breakup. Jake confided over drinks one evening, but then someone mentioned the whole airport thing and the blocking situation, and suddenly her story didn't add up. Management had a talk with her about keeping personal drama out of the workplace. I didn't take any satisfaction in Lydia's professional troubles, but I did appreciate that the truth had a way of surfacing regardless of how people tried to spin it. In September, the month we were supposed to be getting married, I got one final communication from Lydia. It wasn't a phone call or a text. It was a certified letter delivered to my apartment, which meant she'd paid extra to ensure I received it and had to sign for it. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten on expensive stationery. She'd clearly spent considerable time crafting it. The tone was different from her previous attempts, less demanding, more reflective. She acknowledged that she'd made serious mistakes and handled things poorly. She admitted that the blocking was immature and that she should have communicated better. But even in her apology, she couldn't resist rewriting history. She claimed that she'd been overwhelmed by societal pressure to get married and had felt trapped by expectations. She suggested that our relationship had become too serious too quickly and that she'd needed to rediscover herself before committing to marriage. The letter ended with a proposal. I think we both learned important things about ourselves during this time apart. Maybe we could start over slowly as friends. I believe we could build something even stronger than what we had before now, that we understand each other better. I read the letter twice, then filed it in my facts folder on my computer. Not because I planned to respond, but because it perfectly captured the fundamental problem that had probably existed throughout our entire relationship. Lydia's inability to take genuine responsibility for her actions. Even in her most sincere attempt at an apology, she was still portraying herself as a victim of circumstances rather than someone who had made deliberate, hurtful choices. She turned, I abandoned my fiancé at the airport and disappeared for 6 weeks into. I was overwhelmed by societal pressure and needed to rediscover myself. I never responded to that letter. 2 weeks later, I accepted the position at Stanford. The timing was perfect. I could finish the fall semester at Northwestern and start in California after New Year's. My parents were supportive, though my mother worried about me being so far from family. My father predictably focused on the career benefits. Son, this sounds like exactly the kind of opportunity you've been working toward your whole career, he said during our last conversation before I started packing. Sometimes life forces changes on us that we wouldn't have chosen, but that doesn't mean they can't be good changes. He was right. Moving to California felt like stepping into a life I'd never allowed myself to imagine without the constraints of accommodating someone else's career, social circle, and preferences. I could finally make decisions based purely on what was best for my own future. My last week in Chicago, I ran into Sarah at a coffee shop in Lincoln Park. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me, but approached my table anyway. Graham, hi. How are you doing? I'm well, Sarah. Actually, I'm moving to California next month for a new position. That's great. A fresh start, right? She paused, then added, quietly, I owe you an apology. I didn't know the whole story when everything happened. Lydia told us that you two had talked about taking a break and that you'd mutually agreed to it. I had no idea she'd blocked you or that the whole thing was so one-sided. I appreciate that, I said, but honestly, it doesn't matter now. It all worked out for the best. She's been pretty miserable, you know. I think she really regrets how she handled everything. I looked at Sarah, this person who'd been part of my life for 5 years through her friendship with Lydia, and felt nothing but mild curiosity about her update. I hope she figures things out, I said, and meant it. But that's not my concern anymore. As I boarded my flight to San Francisco in January 2025, I thought about how different this departure felt from that morning at O'Hare 7 months earlier. This time, I was choosing to leave. This time, I knew exactly where I was going and why. This time, I was traveling towards something instead of recovering from something. The irony wasn't lost on me. Lydia's European trip was supposed to be about discovering what she really wanted. Instead, it had shown me what I really needed. Someone who solved problems instead of running from them. Someone who communicated instead of disappearing. Someone who took responsibility instead of playing victim. Now, 8 months into my fellowship at Stanford, I'm happier than I've been in years. My research is thriving. I've made genuine friendships with colleagues who share my interests. And I've started dating someone who actually knows how to have difficult conversations instead of booking international flights to avoid them. At 35, I finally feel like I'm living the life I was meant to live. Sometimes people ask me if I ever regret how I handled the situation with Lydia. The answer is simple. Absolutely not. I gave her exactly what she asked for at that airport. A break from our relationship. The only difference was that I made it permanent, which was apparently not what she'd expected when she made her dramatic announcement before boarding that flight to Paris. In the end, Lydia taught me something valuable about relationships and respect. When someone shows you who they are, when they demonstrate through their actions that they'll abandon you in times of stress rather than work through problems together, believe them the first time. I dodged more than a bullet. That day at O'Hare Airport, I dodged a lifetime of walking on eggshells, managing someone else's emotional instability, and being held responsible for problems I didn't create. And that's the most successful revenge of all. Building a life so much better than what you almost settled for that you can't imagine having made any other choice. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and leave a comment letting me know what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. The story continues in the next chapter in the next linked video. But first, I need you to subscribe to join the family, as we are looking forward to hit our first 10,000 subscribers target, and feel free to share your story in the comments.